every day there's a new company that comes up because you're in a creative world, because this is Africa. And we've also seen a lot of African companies getting a lot of funding, which takes them a little bit closer to government regulation. So on the one hand, you have innovation. On the other hand, you have government regulation. So who gets to win at the end of the day? To discuss our African governments stifling innovation, I have a panel that will introduce themselves very shortly. I would like to introduce my panel. Lady, gentlemen, please introduce yourselves.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rosemary Kimwatu, a tech lawyer, tech wakili, public policy manager at Safaricom, and very excited to have this amazing conversation about technology, regulation, policy, where are we headed, what is our future, and happy to be here.
Collins, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Everybody. Hi, everybody. My name is Collins Onibu. I'm in Lagos. I'm an entrepreneur. I run Signal Land Technology Holdings. We have subsidiaries in cloud technology. We have in enterprise tech. We have a venture company that invests in startups. Recently, I was on the board of the Lagos NGO Network. I'm happy to be here. We work for startups. We work for mature companies. We work with government. We work with everybody. It's a good conversation to have today. Thank you very much.
Hey, Eddie. We missed you yesterday. How are you? Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I think we got the timings mixed up. But yeah, glad to be here. Glad to be with CIO. Nice to see you again, Carol. My name is Eddie Ndishu. I'm the co-founder, and glad to see my co-panelists, familiar faces up there. My name is Eddie Ndishu. I'm the co-founder and CEO of WapiPay. WapiPay is one of those companies, Carol, you mentioned, that spring up, that now need to get closer to regulation in terms of innovation. We focus on Africa-Asia payments, making it extremely easy and affordable for any African to be able to pay across Asia and not just China. So where in the world would you pay? And that's what we ask customers.
Maura, how are you?
Hi, Carol.
Please introduce yourself.
Good morning. Nice to see you again, and I like your hair.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Mohradwati. I'm honored to be on this panel. Right now, I'm the founder and the chairman of FinTech Institute, an institute that deals with regulations and capacity building for governments and for entities, especially with regard to creating and enabling regulatory environment. I am known for my work at the Central Bank of Kenya, where I retired. I was the head of the National Payment System Department during the many years of modernizing the payment system, and for which we are proud as Kenyans to be leaders in the world. And we are hoping that the enabling regulatory framework is something that our country can embed in its government regulatory bodies. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, first, I'd just like to ask, is African government actually stifling regulation, or is this actually just an urban legend? It's been repeated so many times that we actually believe it. Is it actually true? Rosemary, I'll start with you.
Well, that's a very important question. And I think the answer to that is a quick no. Because when people like Stephen Moora were in office, they gave us regulation and legislation that have enabled us to, leapfrog technology, utilize mobile technology in ways we couldn't ever imagine. Today in Kenya, we pass value on a day-to-day basis using the phone. So I think in that regard, there's been great. There's been a great enablement by the Kenyan regulators. So for me, yes, we've really been assisted as a nation to leapfrog. But of course, as we move forward in this discussion, we'll discuss what could be done better. We have the Communications Authority, which offers support in terms of infrastructure, licensing, spectrum. We have the Competition Authority that has helped us learn how better to treat customers in terms of showing balances, how much is there. So we've seen positive regulation, but for now, if it was a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give an 8 because of where we are today.
Oh, that's a good score. Maura, what would you give us?
The answer in that question is not an easy yes. It's actually a yes and a no. Why do I say yes? We do have regulatory institutions or bodies in Kenya who are doing the right thing. And here I say enabling regulatory framework is not an event, it's a process. And for that reason, I want to say that I always challenge given the persons who are sitting in the regulatory bodies today. If you climb to the top of Mount Kenya, here many people talk about climbing Mount Kenya. It is an event, and when you get there, it's also difficult to stay up there. So when we are talking about why we are saying is a yes and a no, the practice of creating enabling regulations requires that you do research. You first of all start with research, and then you come up with policy, and then you come up with regulations. We have seen in the recent past situations where, in some cases, we do have the old practices of control, where you hide some government officers, control and say that this is the way things should be done. They have not even engaged the industry. So my practice, and that is why when we did the National Payment System regulations, you all remember that M-Pesa was authorized in 2007. At that time, we didn't have a regulation about mobile money. But we didn't say we are not going to authorize M-Pesa, and we thank the leadership of the Central Bank of Kenya, and in fact the government, for allowing us to use what we called a letter of no objection. Using this letter, we were able to stay with the industry up to 2011 when we came up with the National Payment Systems Act. The act took those many years, but the process of giving services was not stopped. We then did do a lot of research and came up with the regulations for mobile payments and other payments in 2014. Those 7 years are like the 7 years we read in the Bible. Those are years when you nurture and you create an enabling regulatory framework. So the journey to create a regulatory framework is not one where you find in a week somebody has already said these are the regulations. This is why I'm saying it's a yes and a no. And I could easily give ourselves a 6 out of 10, because I do think there is a lot of work around creating enabling environment, especially around this time on fintech, when we need to have sandboxes and other instruments that will help us create an enabling regulatory framework. Thank you.
Eddie, what was your experience when you were founding WAPIPI? What happened with you and the government regulations? Did they stifle you, or did they actually give you wings to fly?
So to answer your question directly, yes, they did support us eventually. I think to the first initial question, does regulation stifle innovation? The answer directly for me is no. And I support what Rose has mentioned and what my good leader, Bwana has mentioned in terms of it is a process, it is not an event. Regulation is not the yoke of oppression for fintechs, as it were, as it's portrayed. However, what regulation does is it has this way of creating a culture of how things are done. Just like Bwana said, this is the way we do it, this is how we do it. And cultures are really stubborn things. They're really stubborn things that just don't go away very easily. And I think we started with a momentum for mobile money. I think we're stuck on that momentum. I think we need to start thinking about post-mobile money era and allow for more creativity and innovation to exist. My personal experience, your second question and how you framed it, was especially for WAPIPI. I'm glad to announce that we received our letter of intent, which is an approval in principle for us to allow us to be able to do money transfer between Africa and Asia. We're the first fintech to be able to do this, focusing on payouts into Asia across Africa. And we've got some fantastic partnerships and relationships. And, going through the process of getting that approval in principle from the Central Bank of Kenya allowed us to take the Central Bank of Kenya through the different partnerships and the different models that we're looking at to deliver products and services. This is something that we both got a refresher understanding of the things that are critical when it comes to oversight. And we got to learn from each other. However, this took 2 years. And this is the sad thing. And I think just to what Rose said, we need to look at how to better improve how we deliver governance, how we deliver possibility of oversight. We've done it before. I think we can continue doing it. We've done, as Wanamora has mentioned, with M-Pesa, to allow us to dream of a possibility where things can be easier, faster, cheaper for customers, and be able to deliver better, not just inclusion. I think we're at 80% financial inclusion now, for instance, with financial services. I think now we need to focus on exclusion, and exclusion is a whole different conversation. And that's what WapiPay is trying to achieve. So regulation is not the yoke of oppression for fintechs, as it's portrayed, but rather the opportunity and understanding for oversight. And I think we'll discuss about self-regulation further as we continue to discuss.
Hey, Collins, what do you think? Do you agree with the complicated answer, or is your answer just a plain no?
It's a complicated answer. It's not as straightforward as it looks. Is regulation good? Regulation is good. Is innovation good? Innovation is also very important. I think there's a thin line between for the regulator to make sure that in regulating innovation. In Nigeria, there are a lot of regulatory bodies that regulate actually. But if you think about it, even if you want to start a company today, the first regulation you come through is the government says to go and register this company. That's also regulation in itself, even the process of starting a company. So you can't, because you say you want to innovate, you will not come under some form of regulation or the other. But for the regulator also, there has to be some balance in making sure that as they're doing that, you don't stifle innovation. And remember why the regulator is in the first place. Sometimes it's there to protect the customer, the final customer who consumes whatever you do at the end of the day. Sometimes it's also to make sure that the players play fair. Sometimes it's to make sure that there are not too many players in the same place and that all of them are fair to each other and fair to the market. So there has to be regulation. You have to accept some level of regulation. In the fintech space today in Nigeria, there's a lot of debate around regulators coming after them. Now, a lot of them started with very little regulation because government thought they were very small companies, and they started growing, and they are spending a lot of customers' money. Now, in Nigeria, the Central Bank of Nigeria regulates banking, and they have done a lot of heavy regulation because they want to make sure that customers don't lose their money. We had cases in the past where there was a banking crisis and customers lost money. So if you are going to the point where fintech companies are beginning to hold a lot of transactions with customers' funds, it makes sense for the regulators to come in and make sure that nobody takes the money and runs away. And it has happened a few times. So you have to accept that they have to be regulated. So I think that when you're going into a new area, sometimes regulators are behind the innovators, but at some point they're coming there and say, look, let's play a fair market for everybody and make sure that we protect the customer also. So look, if you're starting a company, you have to accept that no matter what you are, whether you're an innovator or you're building a standard company, you must come into a regulated environment at one point or other. But if you are a fast mover and have a first mover advantage, sometimes they allow you to move a bit ahead before they understand even what they are doing, and you take up and make the best of it. But at some point, you have to accept that they have to be regulated.
So I would have to ask all of you, is it possible, is it at all likely that you can actually prevent monopoly, but at the same time you can let innovation thrive? Can you actually do both? Because this is what's happening with big tech right now. So is it bad to be big? Is big being punished for that reason? I'll start with you, Eddie.
I don't think being big is bad. I think being big is a validation that the service or the role you're offering customers is of value, and customers see value in it, and that's why they continue to use the service, and more people continue to access. I think the challenge we have today, especially with regulation, and I know we're speaking about Kenya specifically, but if you look at how most governments work, is they would use one regulatory institution to support another regulatory institution. So I'll give you a quick example. If you look at mobile money today, no license has been issued to a private entity, a mobile money PSP license, where you're able to hold a wallet without by Central Bank of Kenya, without them being first regulated and operational by Communication Authority of Kenya. the CAK. So the support structures that regulatory bodies give each other and how government has dictated this culture. Like I said, culture is a very stubborn thing. It doesn't go away very easily. To be able to get one oversight, you need to be on oversight on another institution. You know, it's no coincidence that we only have three or four PSP licenses, and all of them have communication authority licenses. And I think this framework and structure is what has created a stubborn culture and not being able to allow private institutions to be able to get into mobile money. And for that reason and that reason alone, we've seen telcos be able to grow very aggressively and be very relevant. And because they're offering a very valuable service to customers, they become these monopolies. But I think we need to stop this. I think they also need to, you know, we have fantastic examples. If you look at the East, where the Chinese government is honing down on private entities that have become too big, and they're actually taking equity from these companies. We're talking about WeChat, Alipay, Michuan. These are companies that have amassed very many customers in the billions, not in the few millions that we have here in Kenya. And the government is stepping in and saying, hang on, guys, you now need to come into a different level of oversight where the government actually sits in your board, the government actually dictates what products and services you're able to launch into the market. I think this is important. I think this is critical because it's very difficult to innovate around a monopolistic or a monopoly framework or structure in a country. And this will stifle innovation.
All right, Rosemary, it's very interesting that he's saying this, but in your case, you work for a company everybody thinks is a monopoly, but at the same time, it's one of the most innovative companies in the country. So what do you think?
I'll be very firm on this one. Big is not bad. And I like the fact that Eddie has pointed out something very important, that, you know, we just handle a few millions. There's space for us as Kenyans to be leaders in the industry, not just in Kenya, but even in the region. And I think for that to happen, we'll need more regulatory flexibility. In terms of not even regulatory flexibility, regulatory agility, to ensure that we harness the best out of what we can as an industry, and even so that we can, you know, spread whatever it is that we've been able to achieve here in Kenya. So, and that will just not even talk about, say, local cooperation, even regional integrations. I'm looking forward to what the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement will offer. And can we also have companies that are as big as, you know, the WeChat, and, you know, maybe even as big as WapiPay will one day be. So I think it's a good time to be Kenyan. It's a good time to be a Kenyan company that's innovating, but also in order for us to achieve the scale that is required, the impactful scale that is needed for us to be of great impact, not just in Africa, but even regionally and even internationally, we need more regulatory agility. And maybe I'll speak to this. We've seen that even in the regions that Eddie has mentioned, Southeast Asia, they have a very huge sandbox approach that he's taken. And of course, as Stephen also mentioned earlier, we almost had a similar thing when we were starting out. I think there's room for more in this country, even as we innovate with more products. Right now, it's not the time to, to throttle the horse. I think we should, at this point, be encouraging as much growth as is possible so that we can fully benefit from the benefits of the industry. We need to grow. We're still at an nascent stage. We've only been here from, 2007, and payments much shorter. So let's see what more we could do in a few years if given a chance. So, Eddie, Polesana, let's run all of us.
No. I think the acceptance has to happen.
Yeah.
The institution has become a monopoly, and their role is now different. Their role is not to transform or innovate anymore. Their role now is to be the foundation of more innovations. And I think this needs to be defined very clearly for large institutions.
But I wouldn't think, I thought that the role regulators coming to the market is actually to prevent monopoly tendencies. But some industries are different. There are some industries that everybody cannot get in because sometimes, for instance, if the entry level is high, entry barrier is high, no matter how much you regulate it, there will only be few players. Today in Nigeria, there was a time with 50 telecom or 30 telecom companies, and then they licensed GSM operators, and at that point, the market could only support a few. It's free entry today in Nigeria to sort of a GSM company, but to do that, you need $1 billion. So that in itself prevents you from entering. So at the end of the day, you only have to have few players because of the size of the market and the nature of innovation you have to do. Each time Nigeria wants to upgrade their network, they spend $1 billion. So that is not a market for everybody. So essentially, they become semi-monopolies by the nature of the business. But a lot of times, you have to make sure that a particular industry can lead to a certain number of players. There's only one reason why only Facebook is thriving in a particular space in America. It is free for everybody to enter, but for you to enter and build Facebook today, you need billions and billions of dollars. That kind of creates a monopoly. I think what happened was that the first innovators get into the market, grow big enough, regulators come in that place. They don't use the advantage they already have. So it's free for you to get in, but if it's too difficult of financial requirements, there's really nothing much about it. I think we should focus on ensuring that the market, the regulators give everybody space to get in when they need to get in. And I think the market allows you to get in, you get in. But you cannot, I don't like the idea of being kind of jealous of the monopolies because it doesn't have a certain advantage. If you're there already, nobody should destroy you because you can get elected.
All right. So just because the director is telling me time is up, just for everybody, just as a last word, and also, do you think that self-regulation is the best regulation as you give your closing remarks?
Can I go first?
Yes, sure.
I guess I should start because I guess
But keep it very short.
Because I didn't contribute. Yeah. I want to say that to a person in Kenya who has never seen River Nile, Tana River
can you switch on your video, Stephen? Switch on your video so we can see you.
You can see me. I want to start by saying to a person in Kenya who has never seen River Nile, River Tana is a monopoly. There is that what we are lacking in Africa are big institutions. If you think about Microsoft, Google, everybody who is doing big business in the world, they are doing it because they are big. Our problem is that we are small. The issue is not about monopoly. The issue is about the abuse of dominance. And that we have a competition authority and we have competition laws to deal with. And that is not an issue which should not be a problem. Our continent should have good competition authorities to check on dominance. Otherwise, we need to be big, not small. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Stephen. Can I get your closing remarks? And keep it short. Do you have any closing remarks?
My closing remarks is creating an enabling regulatory environment is what we need in this continent. And for that, we need Africa to produce the Googles and the Microsofts of the next century. And that can only be done if we authorize innovators to innovate and regulation and not to steal for growth. Thank you.
Eddie, that's a direct challenge to you. Get big.
Absolutely, and that's why we chose to do a global payments business, not a local Kenyan payments business. I think congratulations. And thank you, Bonomore. I like what you said. You can be number one in a village until you come to the city, and you find there are smarter people in the city than you are, and yet you are being hailed and praised when you are in your village. My closing remarks are really around 4 areas, and I echo what the central bank governor mentioned earlier this week in a question about blockchain and crypto and decentralized finance, etc. I think the realization that regulation has to come to is acceptance, awareness, enlightenment, and collaboration. I think it's now a necessity, especially when we're walking we're treading very carefully into the conversation of dominance. And I think we're already there. We're already right in the mark of it. I think the regulatory environment needs to find these 3 areas and make this really stubborn thing called culture go away, even within their own institutions.
Rosemary?
My closing remark is I'll echo what we've been saying. Big is not bad. I think also what has been repeated, that let's look at ourselves in a more global scale. Let's see what more can be achieved. But I think the rallying call to regulators is let's have more regulatory agility so that we can harness the best of our innovation. Big is not bad. Let us see how big we can get. And yes, there are checks and balances. There are regulators that come in to manage those kind of situations. Being big is not a bad thing. Just abusing your size is the bad thing. So looking forward to, a greater space for wider innovation for this region and also for Africa as a whole. Thank you.
Collins, just round it off for us.
Okay, I think that innovation comes in various ways because the even regulators are very innovative. So let's not think about it as innovators are enemies of regulators. I think that both sides should collaborate. If you think you're an innovator, you have to know that at some point you need a regulator. So collaborating with the regulator, instead of thinking that it's an enemy, we help you more as you move along. I agree with those who are talking about scale. Scale is important. We need to build large companies in Africa, and we need to build innovative regulators in Africa to make sure that our companies scale. It's not about the quantity of companies you have, it's the quality and size of those companies to be able to compete, because at some point, African companies have to compete the rest of the world, and they have to compete against those who have scale. Otherwise, they'll just eat you. I'm up for some bit of regulation, intelligent regulation, innovative regulation, and then innovators have to know that they have to be regulators. Thanks.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's been a riveting conversation. I would have liked to prolong it, but alas, time is up. So thank you so much, and have yourselves a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Now, everyone, you heard it from them. African governments do not stifle regulation, not as such, and it's not so simple. So if before you grow your biggest company, you need to think about government and regulations as a friend and an ally, as opposed to something that's going to stifle you. So thank you so much, and have yourselves a good afternoon.